Every morning in the Middle Ages didn't begin with an alarm or a gentle lamp glow. It began with the terrifying sense that even your own breath could betray you. People woke up without knowing whether someone in the house had quietly slipped away during the night from cold, from hunger, or from a fever that struck too fast to even name. And the most frightening part was that no one considered this unusual. It was simply life, a survival game they were forced to play every single day. There was no electricity, no medicine, and no guarantee that today would be any better than yesterday. Everything revolved around one word: preparation, because one tiny mistake, forgetting to seal a draft, miscalculating food stores, overlooking the signs of a storm, could punish an entire family for an entire winter. What made that world harsh wasn't the battles or the legends of swords and dragons, but the quiet moments in between. A hearth that died too early, a water jug emptied before the next rain, a child's cough that wouldn't stop. Each one was a reminder of how fragile life really was. When we look at our world today, we sometimes forget that humans once survived conditions we now call unlivable. But they did survive, and they endured through skills we may have unknowingly left behind. If you want to understand how they fought against such a relentless world, keep watching the next part and share your thoughts below. These stories still have much more to reveal. In the Middle Ages, finding water wasn't just a daily routine, it was a life or death gamble. Many families had witnessed tragedy unfold over a single scoop of water that looked harmless. Children drank from a stream so clear it sparkled, unaware that an animal carcass was decomposing upstream, and they never woke up again. People back then understood one brutal truth. The cleaner the water looked, the more suspicious it should be, because nothing was more dangerous than false purity in a world filled with animal remains, refuse, and poisonous mud. They didn't know about bacteria or toxins, but they knew this. Choosing the wrong water source meant choosing death. So they relied on instincts and wisdom passed down through generations. Rainwater was caught from thatched roofs, left to settle, then filtered through cloth, sand, or crushed charcoal. River water had to be checked for color, smell, and floating bubbles, because even a single odd sign could put an entire family in danger. Many households even buried clay jars of water deep underground to keep it cool and slow spoilage, treating them like hidden reserves of safety. In a world where people lived right on the razor-thin edge between survival and loss, water wasn't a resource. It was a test. And how they passed that test is the reason their communities endured for centuries. If you want to explore more survival skills that help them navigate such a brutal age, share your thoughts below. In the Middle Ages, finding water wasn't just a daily task. It was a life or death gamble. Many families had seen tragedy unfold over a single scoop of water that looked harmless. Some children drank from crystal clear streams that hid the decay of an animal carcass upstream, and they never woke up again. People back then understood one thing very clearly. The more beautiful the water looked, the more suspicious it should be, because nothing was more dangerous than fake cleanliness in a world filled with dead animals, waste, and toxic mud. They didn't know about bacteria or poisons. They simply knew one undeniable truth. Choosing the wrong water source was choosing death. So they relied on experience and intuition passed down through generations. Rainwater was caught from thatched roofs, left to settle, then strained through cloth, sand, or crushed charcoal. River water had to be judged by its color, its smell, and even the bubbles on its surface, because a single strange sign was enough to put a whole family at risk. Some households even buried clay jars deep underground to keep the water cool and slow spoilage, treating them like a hidden reserve they could trust. In a world where people lived right on the fragile border between life and loss, water wasn't a resource, it was a test. And the way they passed that test is the reason their communities survived for centuries. If you want to discover the other survival skills they used to endure such a harsh age, share your thoughts below. In the Middle Ages, building shelter wasn't a long-term project or a leisurely craft. It was often a race against death. When the wind shifted, the clouds sank low, and cold mist crawled down the hillsides. People knew they had only a few hours before the temperature dropped to a level that could wipe out an entire family in a single night. There was no cut lumber, no nails, no blueprints, only soil, branches, dry grass, and a pair of hands that had to work faster than fear itself. Wattle and daub walls were thrown together in breathless urgency, branches woven into a quick frame, then packed with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung to form a natural insulating barrier. When time was even shorter, they used sod, thick chunks of earth cut with roots intact, stacked like living bricks, warm enough that surviving the first night meant hope. Roofs were whatever could keep rain out and wind at bay. Straw, leaves, bark, anything that didn't let the sky slip through. In the forest, they built lean-tos from heavy branches, layering moss and mud over them to block the night's breath. On the open plains, they dug half-buried pits to borrow warmth directly from the earth. What's terrifying is that no one built for comfort. They built because a single small gap could let the night wind slip inside and steal the life of the weakest in the household. In that brutal reality, skill wasn't craftsmanship. It was survival instinct sharpened by countless unforgiving winters. If you've ever wondered what it would feel like to build a roof over your head with only a few hours before darkness falls, share your thoughts below. It's a question that makes many people reconsider what they're truly capable of. Traveling in the Middle Ages wasn't a peaceful walk through nature. It was stepping into a landscape where one wrong turn could end in death. There were no compasses, no maps, no signposts. People relied entirely on memory, faint marks on the ground, and the sky above. But those clues were so fragile that a single strong wind could erase them. Stray just 1 mile off course, and you might wander into wolf territory. Or worse, into the hands of bandits who stalked the very routes merchants feared the most. Even a light snowfall could wipe away every trail, leaving a traveler standing in a vast forest with no way to know which path was familiar and which one led straight to a cliff. So, they learned to read the smallest hints, the angle of the sun filtering through the canopy, the position of the North Star in winter, the thicker moss on the north side of fallen logs, or the faint murmur of water signaling a nearby stream. Experienced travelers could even rely on the flap of distant wings or the smell of damp soil to guess how far they were from safety. And the frightening truth was that even the most skilled wanderers sometimes vanished without a trace. The forest offered no answers, and the wind carried no news of the lost. In that world, navigation wasn't just a skill. It was a reminder that humans were tiny wanderers moving through a vast, indifferent wilderness. If you've ever imagined surviving without modern tools, picture yourself standing alone in that silent forest and share what you think would happen next. In the Middle Ages, preserving food wasn't a kitchen chore. It was a survival ritual, wrapped in something almost mythical. Every butchering season, every harvest day felt like a moment that could determine the fate of an entire community, because a single spoiled batch of salt, a poorly packed barrel of meat, or a fish hung at the wrong height could doom a village to months of hunger and cold. People believed winter winds carried the spirits of those who starved the year before, and if the meat in storage was prepared carelessly, that same cold breath would rot it before it saved anyone. It wasn't superstition, it was knowledge carved from too many dark winters. Salt was poured in layers as thick as snow, meat was pressed tight inside wooden barrels, and fish had to be hung at just the right height to avoid the dampness rising from the earth. Smoke from the hearth was kept at a strange, careful temperature, not hot enough to cook the meat, but warm enough for it to absorb the wood's aroma and build an invisible shield of preservation. When the cold grew harsh enough to crack metal, people dug deep pits lined with straw and frozen stones, burying meat and fish like treasure, hoping they would survive until spring. But the most frightening truth was this: even when food smelled wrong, they still had to eat it. Throwing it away meant choosing death. Eating it meant days of stomach pain they simply had to endure. Fermented vegetables were seen as winter's miracle, and the thick layer of fat-sealing confit was the final line between living and dying. Yet beneath all these rituals lay a chilling silence. No one ever knew if their stores would last the season or betray them at the worst possible moment. If you've ever tried a traditional preservation method, or simply want to reflect on the resilience of those who came before, share your thoughts below. These stories reveal more than most people expect. In the Middle Ages, self-defense wasn't a choice. It clung to every breath, because danger didn't just come from war, but from the very roads people walked, the silent forests around them, and the desperate souls driven mad by hunger and cold. A peasant stepping outside at dusk knew that a single unfamiliar shadow might mean a wolf, a thief, or worse, a starving group that had lost all restraint. So everything they touched could become a weapon. An ashwood staff used to herd livestock could, in an instant, become the only thing standing between them and death. Sickles for harvesting were sharpened with an extra edge, and kitchen knives were kept hidden close to the waist, not for cooking, but for the moment when there was no way out. And when night fell, they built thorn fences so dense that even wild animals avoided them, dug deep pit traps at the entrance of their homes, and hung tiny bells on doors to detect the slightest movement in the dark. What made that era so tense was a simple truth. Common people weren't allowed to carry swords or spears like the upper classes, yet they were the ones who faced danger most often. So every tool had two identities, one to feed the family and one to keep the family alive. In that harsh world, self-defense became a whispered survival code passed down through generations. And if you've ever wondered whether you could live in such a place, ask yourself this: what would you choose as your first weapon? Share your thoughts below. In the Middle Ages, staying warm in winter wasn't as simple as adding another blanket. It was a silent war against a cold that could steal a life in just a few hours. When the firewood dwindled and the hearth began to fade, fear crept into every corner of the house. People knew that if the flame died too soon, the whole family would shiver until morning, and the smallest child might never wake up again. So they resorted to methods that modern ears would find unsettling. In some places, people held goats, dogs, or calves against their chests, huddling together inside deep straw nests like animal dens to trap whatever fragile warmth they could. Walls were patched with mud, straw, and even dried dung to seal every draft. Clothes were layered until movement was stiff and awkward, but removing even one layer meant letting the cold claw straight into their bones. Many families heated stones until they glowed warm, wrapped them in cloth, and hid them beneath piles of straw just to stretch a few more precious hours of heat, a luxury by their standards. And on the longest nights, when the wind howled outside and snow buried the door, they had only one dependable way to survive. They relied on each other. The more bodies, the better, because their own warmth was the last furnace they had left. In the Middle Ages, healing didn't mean seeking a doctor or waiting for a miracle. It was the moment people were forced to face a brutal truth. The body could betray them at any time. In poor villages, when a small cut began to swell or a fever lingered too long, everyone understood they were stepping into a battle with no rescue coming. Yet in that desperation, they revealed a toughness and resolve that would shock the modern world. They used yarrow to stop bleeding as if it were a battlefield secret. They chewed willow bark to ease pain and bring down fevers, even though its bitterness burned their throats. They pressed garlic, onions, and honey onto wounds like participants in an ancient ritual, rather than mere patients. When infection spread, they heated iron until it glowed red and pressed it directly onto the skin. No anesthetic, no comfort, only screams cutting through the night and the belief that such agony might purchase one more chance at survival. Midwives, herbalists, and elder women carried knowledge handed down through generations. No formal training, yet they were the anchor of the entire community. And though unspoken, everyone knew their healing skill was the village's quiet form of political power. Whoever held that knowledge held the fate of many lives. In a world where death was a constant shadow, they survived through instinct, memory, and sheer resilience. If hearing this makes you wonder whether you'd have the courage to endure such treatments, share your thoughts. It's a question that has made many pause and reflect. There is a truth modern people rarely imagine. In the Middle Ages, where disease, hunger, and war lurked like endless shadows, the thing that kept people from collapsing wasn't weapons or food, but belief. Faced with a reality so harsh that no one could ever be certain they'd live until sunset, people were forced to create a second world to take shelter in. A world of gods, omens, rituals, and old stories whispered beneath the dim glow of torches. That belief wasn't naive superstition. It was the final anchor keeping their minds from sinking. When the harvest failed, they saw it as a warning. When children fell sick again and again, they believed an invisible rule had been broken. And when the cold tore through the village, they lit ritual fires as a way of telling the darkness they weren't ready to give up. They carved memories into funeral rites, found comfort in the sound of church bells, and shared stories of guardian spirits to remind one another they weren't alone. The strange thing is that these unscientific beliefs help them stay calm, determined, and united, the very qualities any era needs to survive. And if you look closely, the lesson is still true today. Humans don't endure because of physical strength, but because of the meaning they create in the middle of chaos. If that resonates with you, share a belief or a story that helped you through a difficult time. And if you want to keep exploring the survival secrets our ancestors left behind, don't forget to subscribe and continue this journey with us.